Alrighty, Eileen Haskett is one of our amazing guest speakers today. She's giving you the peace sign there. Eileen is a friend of mine from Acadia University. Some of you know where Acadia is in Nova Scotia, and she's a marine biologist and science educator. Eileen, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Of course. So hi, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm super excited to meet all of you and get to talk to you. A little bit about me. I'm from Antigonish, Nova Scotia. I'm sure everyone from Nova Scotia knows where Antigonish is, but if you don't, it's on the tip of the mainland. I've always been interested in marine biology. My father is a lobster fisherman, and I always kind of wanted to get into the science side of the ocean. So I went to Acadia and actually didn't have a very linear path to where I am now. Because I was in geology. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But yeah, now I live in Panama and I like science. I like being in nature. I like surfing. I love working with kids. And that's how Julia and I met. We both worked in the SMILE program at Acadia University. If any of you guys know about it or plan to join it when you go to Acadia.
She's trying to pitch Acadia to you right now.
And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
And I included, of course, a lovely photo I stole off the internet of a sea urchin there because Eileen actually did sea urchin research at the Smithsonian. So she's going to be talking to you guys a little bit about that, which is super interesting. And I love this photo of her here with some really cute black sea urchins. They're not the most cuddly animals I would expect.
No, they're a little, they're a little prickly in nature. They don't love to, they're not the most kind-hearted of animals, but you learn to love them.
Learn to love them. There you go. Yeah. And our second special guest, sorry, let me click on down here, is Carolina Cesar, and she's a marine biologist and research technician at the Smithsonian. And Carolina, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yes, of course. Good morning, everyone. I'm Carolina. I'm from Panama, and I'm a marine biologist. I studied coral reefs in Parque Nacional Coiba, which I'm going to talk to you a little bit more before coming into the Smithsonian. I like taking surf photography and I love diving as my hobby. And I also do a little bit of skateboarding, longboard skateboarding, so I love the adrenaline. And well, I'm so happy to talk to you a little bit more about what is the Smithsonian and how I got here to Panama and where we are now.
Fantastic. And we have a cool photo down here in the middle of Carolina doing one of her favorite hobbies, just talking about scuba diving. And also looking super cool driving this boat. Can I just say?
So
exhilarating.
Cool.
Yes, absolutely.
So what the Smithsonian is a huge organization. It's a research institution and organization that is run by the American government. And what it does is it has 19 museums, it has a zoo, it has libraries, and the Smithsonian Institution has been around since 1846. And basically what they do is they want to advance and diffuse knowledge. So what that basically means is that they want the world and the people to know more about everything. They want to share knowledge. They want everybody to be able to learn all across America, and their institutions are in 46 states, and I believe something like 20 countries or something, and Panama being one of them. So all of their museums are free to enter. So if you go to Washington, D.C., there is a number of different museums that you can go to for free. Over 30 million people go to these museums every year, free of charge. And it's a great way to learn about our natural world. And the Smithsonian also invests a lot of their money into research and people like me and Carolina to learn more about the world, learn more about the natural world, and exactly, the advancement of knowledge. So our particular institution is the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute, and which, just in case you guys didn't know, it was in Panama. I circled it right here, but Julia gave us the heads up of where it was earlier, so thank you so much, Julia.
Yes.
So Panama is the perfect location for the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute because as you can see, it's a very small country. It's only, I think it's actually smaller than Nova Scotia, and it hits both the Pacific and the Atlantic Ocean, and you can do research on both sides. And because both oceans are so different, means it's a great spot to look at a lot of wildlife in a very small area.
And not only because of the oceans, but also because there's a lot of different type of tropical rainforest in between these two types of oceans that makes it more interesting for the scientists that are want to study this area.
Exactly. So Panama is a thing called an isthmus, which means it didn't used to exist, but then through volcanic action formed this little strip of land, formed about 4 million years ago and connected the two continents, which created this huge pathway so that all of the animals could go north, south, up, down. Everything could pass through, which makes for a really cool biological advancement. So not only did it separate the two seas, it connected the land. So which is just a big mess of biological happenings, which is really cool. And also why it's a perfect place for the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute to be situated. And Carolina is going to talk a little bit more about the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute in Panama.
So as Julia mentioned before, the Panama Canal is actually one of the reasons the Smithsonian got to Panama. So when the Panama Canal was created, they were interested in knowing how the wildlife that was in the area before the land got flooded. So they wanted to know what type of birds, what type of mammals, what type of fishes, what type of trees, the flora and fauna of the area, so that they would be able to track the differences between of this environment once the Panama Canal was created. So that was around, the Smithsonian was started in Panama around 1964. So it's been a while, like a long track, a long history before we're here. So right now there are 13 different research stations along the Panama Canal, along Panama. So you have research stations that are interested in the tropical forest. And there are also research stations that are situated in the Caribbean side and in the Pacific side. And we are right now in the Caribbean side, and we study in the Boca del Toro Research Station. Of my journey before entering the Smithsonian. So as I mentioned before, I'm a marine biologist, and I studied coral reefs in this particular island that is called Parque Nacional Coiba, which is one of the biggest islands in the Central America. And this is me doing my research. We went to 17 different sites where I get to look at the corals like this, and also to get to look at awesome fishes while I was looking at it. And what I was looking for was to see the health of the corals, to see if there were algae growing on top of it, if the tissue had like different colors, because all of this can help us determine how healthy the corals are. So after this, I have always been into nature. I love wildlife. So like not only marine wildlife, but also like tropical forest.
She's a bit of a bird fanatic.
Yeah, I love birds. And the position opened up to be a naturalist guide in Barrio Colorado. So I signed in. Barrio Colorado is actually an island in the middle of the Panama Canal, which is a research site for tropical wildlife, especially to see the changes of the human impact in wildlife after a certain amount of years. So this is Barrio Colorado Research Station. It's actually one of the oldest stations in the world. It's been there like more than 100 years. Even before the Smithsonian got into Panama, the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute, sorry. So in this place, we get to see, I was a naturalist guide. So we will walk through the jungle, and we will see mostly like this. And in this trail, we will see different type of animals, such as howler monkeys. We will also even see deers, toucans, and poison dart frogs. And also we will see like capuchin monkeys and
Sloths.
sloths. We saw a
Lots of
lot of
sloths.
sloths. Yeah, that's cool.
Caimans.
Caimans, because it's an island surrounded by fresh water. So we will see a lot of caimans in the water when we were on the boat traveling through the canal to get there.
Does everybody know what a caiman is? It's like an alligator, but smaller. It's not, they're not dangerous. They're very small, and their full size is not really big enough to be menacing, but they are pretty freaky to see when you're walking around and you see, especially at night when you see glowing eyes.
Yeah.
They're really cool.
Yeah, they're really cute also.
Yes, very cute.
From far away.
From far away.
So after this, while I was a naturalist guide, a position opened up to study in another island, which is Isla Colón, which is part of an archipelago that's called Bocas del Toro. So I applied and I got the job, thankfully. And now we're here in the Caribbean side. So this is how the Bocas del Toro Research Station looks from the sky. So this is the main lab, and this is the aquarium. This is like the administration office, and this is the dock that belongs to Stry, and this is a tower that it's recording parameters daily that you can see online. I can later get you the link so you can look at it. So this is how the station looks like. It has like a small pond surrounding it. These are the labs. And here sometimes you can see caimans, and a lot of birds. And most of the scientists that come to Bocas del Toro Research Station are interested in coastal and marine environments, such as mangroves. They also study coral reefs, seagrass sites, and some of them come to Bocas del Toro to study dolphins, because there is a huge, there's a good population of dolphins in the archipelago, and they come specifically here to study them. So I work for the Smithsonian for the Marine Geo Network, which is a group of labs around the world that together they do the same experiment in different areas. So then we can compare in the same environment, how it changes throughout the world, and what type of animals we see, and the density and all of that. So one of our projects are the Seagrass protocols, which we look at density, also the type of fishes that we can see in the seagrass sites, and the invertebrates also. And we have another experiment that we do as a network that is called the Panamax. So for the Panamax, we study the animals that are growing in the structures under the water. So this is called fouling communities. So we study these animals that are growing in the structures, but we use like a small plate so we can have like a more controlled experiment. And we deploy it inside a cage. And for this experiment, we deployed a GoPro attached to the cage so we can see what type of organisms were eating these animals, and we get to see like this damselfish getting here, trying to eat the animals that are growing. And we also noticed that they were really curious through the camera and they will like just come towards it and get there, like stay there a long time just playing around. So also for this network, we do a marine monitoring, which we go out weekly throughout the archipelago to like 8 different sites. And we collect parameters with this equipment, and we also collect water for nutrients, and we get to drive the boat around the archipelago because we are all boat drivers. So we grab a boat from the Smithsonian and go out and do all field work and collect data and have a good time.
Yeah.
Also, we get to go to the rivers because we want to know how much fresh water from the mainland is coming into the archipelago. So we also get to drive into the rivers. Here is me and my co-workers that are also research technicians at the same lab. And we are collecting the data from the river width and all the depth, and also water samples for nutrients. And this is how it looks like when it rains. It is really cool to see, but it's also really cold.
Cool to see, tough to be in.
Yes, that's tough to be in, but we also like always try to look at the bright side and see like the nature surrounding you, and it's awesome.
And I'll just take a second to mention to any of our girls that are interested in being marine biologists or biologists in general, you can't be a wimp. You know, if you are a marine biologist and it's raining outside, you still have to go. And that's kind of one of the things that makes your job so cool is that, you know, when I was doing my marine research, there was one day that I had to go out during a hurricane. And it's just something that you have to do to keep kind of collecting information. So that was a part of it that I actually really liked, is kind of you're forced to be outside during these situations when you probably wouldn't otherwise be.
Yes.
That's a really cool photo, by the way, of the jungle in the rain. That's incredible.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
and here it rains a lot, like pouring rain, and it's that's right. You cannot stop the work because of the rain. You have to go outside either way, and that
makes you tough.
Yes, it makes you really tough. So also, as part of the station, we do station tours where we walk around the research stations and we see the caimans. We also see sloths and howler monkeys that are getting into the facility, like in the area of the facilities, and we talk about a little bit about the research we do. And if there are experiments in the aquarium, we get to talk about them, and then like a good talk in the dock and the beautiful. So this is the dock of the Smithsonian, and this is the view from the dock. So it's always like nice to go for a walk there.
Yeah, these are the mountains of Panama, and in the distance, I'm not sure if it's in this picture, but sometimes you can see the volcano that's in Panama from the Smithsonian dock, right?
Yes.
Yeah, on a really clear day.
And on a clear day, if you like look very, very clear day, you can even see mountains from Costa Rica. So we also do monthly talks where we invite the researchers that are in the station to give a talk in town about what they're doing. We also organize beach cleanups with the schools and with the townsfolk to clean the beach that is in front of the station, or if not, different areas.
Awesome. Sweet. Thank you so much, Carolina. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about how I started in marine biology and how I got to the Smithsonian station in Bocas del Toro. So we're going to kind of back up here. I started at Acadia University. I'm not sure how many of you are deciding on where to go to school or whether that's even on your radar right now, but I'm sure all of you know Acadia University is in the Valley of Nova Scotia. And I did my undergrad there, and that's actually where I met Julia. I initially did my undergrad in biology and geology because I thought I wanted to work with rocks. And rocks are very cool, don't get me wrong. I love rocks. However, it's not a path that I could see myself doing for the rest of my life. So I decided to start focusing on biology. So in my undergrad, I was working with marine biology, and then I ended up doing my master's at Acadia. And my master's was on marine worms. So what I was doing, I was working in the Bay of Fundy. So we were talking about hard work. We would trudge out 2 kilometers out into the Bay of Fundy, through the mud, collect samples of little jars filled with marine worms that are called polychaetes. And we would put them in this large metal vat that is at Acadia called a mesocosm. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to see how these worms react when you change the sediment that's floating around in the water, because they eat the sediment. So when that changes, what happens to the worms? And that's what I wanted to know. And we wanted to know that because the Bay of Fundy, I don't know if you guys know anything about the Bay of Fundy, but it is so cool. It is one of the coolest things about Nova Scotia, and it goes so underrated. There is so much water flooding in and out of the Bay of Fundy every day that so many companies are looking to use that power to power, I think, multiple towns in Nova Scotia. They haven't totally nailed it yet, but that's what their goal is. But it is the best place to have mud fights, Ella. I agree with that. So we wanted to see how the animals in the Bay of Fundy would react to a change when they would put the things that would harness the power of the Bay of Fundy into the Bay of Fundy. And it changes the power because it changes the suspended sediment. And I'm sure because you guys are scientists know that like even a small change in an environment can have a huge impact on the rest of the ecosystem. So a little reduction in power would reduce the amount of water, would reduce the amount of sand and dirt and everything flowing in the water, which would change the amount of things that the worms would eat, which would change the amount of worms that the birds that come to the Bay of Fundy would eat, which would change the amount of worms that the sturgeons in the Bay of Fundy would eat. It created this huge chain reaction, and that is what my research at Acadia was about. And that got me interested in marine biology and working with organisms in the ocean. And then I took a random road trip in between my master's and coming to Panama. I went all across Canada, through the States, moved to the other side of Canada, and then I applied to work at the Smithsonian because I had known the director of the station and wanted to get involved in tropical research here. So I ended up applying to work with sea urchins, and that's what I came here to do. So what I do here, this is a neat little picture of the reef that we collect our sea urchins. I don't know if you guys can see my mouse, but I'm circling sea urchins right here. And these sea urchins are they are perfectly adapted to this reef. They are able to hide in the little crevices. They want really high energy environments, and they hide in the little crevices so that nothing can get them, and they're super stuck in there. Okay, perfect. You can't see my mouse. This is my helpful sidekick, Antonia, and my supervisor, Noelle. And we are out on a day going to collect urchins. So we would snorkel around and pick up urchins as carefully as possible from the reef. And what my research here was to do was looking at how sea urchins react to changes in temperature, how they react to changes in pH. So if the water is super acidic or super basic, as well as dissolved oxygen. I don't know if you girls know this, but everything underwater also needs oxygen, not just everything above water. So I was looking at changes in different oxygen levels in the water below. And because all of these three things are affected by climate change, which is unfortunately the effects are very prevalent here, I was looking at how these sea urchins that are super important to the reef ecosystem and how a change in their population will totally affect the reefs, how they would react to different changes in environment. So here's some cool little pictures of sea urchins. They come in a bunch of beautiful colors. This is Echinometra lacunter, which is one of the species I was working with. And then right over here is Echinometra viridis, and there's little babies, so precious. And these are the two species that I was working with because I wanted to see if there was a difference between the two species. And I also did more research on the other side of Panama, closer to, or right inside of Panama City with Pacific species. Little babies, I know, right? They're so cute. So anyway, Echinometra lacunter comes in the most beautiful colors, so I had to take a lot of fancy photos. This photo up here is not a species I worked with. This is called a pencil urchin, but they look so cool that I wanted to include a photo. They look like their spines are pencil crayons or something. They almost look like a toy. These ones, however, they're not toys, and these ones are especially not toys because all of their spines get stuck in your fingers, especially if you are surfing and you step on them. So I have some videos here of just kind of my experimental setup. This is me measuring pH and DO. What we would do is put these urchins in either hot, acidic, or low oxygen conditions. I feel kind of bad. We were pretty mean to them. And we left them in there for 2 hours, and we would see after 2 hours if they were able to flip back over. So this is really essential to sea urchins to be able to survive. It seems kind of basic, and I mean, we don't have really much trouble flipping over, but urchins, one of the only things they can do is flip back over to prevent themselves from getting eaten by other fish, to save themselves from danger. So if they fall off in a reef, their ability to pop back over is essential to their survival. So we measured if after kind of torturing them, if they were able to pop back over and how fast they were able to do it. And this kind of gives us an idea of how they're going to be able to survive in climate change, or if they are surviving in a habitat that has really suffered the effects of environmental destruction, but just changing conditions in their reef habitats. And then here's a little, oh, sorry.
Eileen, sorry, can you just really briefly go over, so you talked about temperature and dissolved oxygen and pH. So with climate change, are all of those things increasing or decreasing? What's happening? Is the ocean getting more acidic, or is it getting more basic? What's happening?
So the conditions I was looking at were kind of, so I actually did a really cool experiment looking at how all of these three interact, which is kind of a brain boggler. It's like when all of them are happening at once or at different times or without one another, how they all interact. So it was a multi-stressor experiment, which means you're looking at three different stressors, whether one has an effect on another, if they have no effect together, if they all work at the same time, if some hurt the urchins more than others. And I was looking at high temperatures when the water gets really hot. So we were looking at like 35 degrees at points. Usually 32, we looked at 26, 29. Those seem like kind of nice to swim around. And then 32 is like, okay, it's getting kind of hot. And then 35 is like, oh my goodness, I can't survive. So 35, we were looking at how they would respond in increased temperatures. And then we were looking at dissolved oxygen levels. So the typical dissolved oxygen for a sea urchin and other animals to survive is around 6 milligrams per liter. And we were looking to like kind of suffocate them with like 1 to 2 milligrams per liter.
And I wanted to mention also that this is really important because there are areas in the Bocas del Toro that have low levels of oxygen. That is why we do the rivers monitoring and the marine monitoring, because we want to get to know how these areas are changing throughout the year, if it's something that is all the way around or if it's seasonal. So also fresh water can affect how many oxygen you can have in the water, because it creates like a layer of fresh water and salt water, and they won't combine, and there will be like this interaction that will create more oxygen for the animals in that area, and can create like hypoxic places, which can also lead to dead zones in the bottom of the sea.
Mm-hmm. And it's like with these things, everything is related. So it's like, because there's high temperature, an area can become more hypoxic. And because an area is hypoxic, they work in tandem with each other to potentially become more acidic. So it's like everything works together to kind of snowball into this thing that makes it really hard for the animals to survive. And exactly like Carolina said, there are areas in Bocas del Toro where it's really low oxygen, really high temperature, and acidic levels. So, and just to continue on what I was saying, and we were looking at normal acidity of ocean water, which is about 8 pH, but then we were reducing it to levels that are kind of predicted for the next 100 years, which is around 7.4 to 7.6. So we were looking at how these sea urchins survive in conditions that are really hard typically for sea animals to survive in. And then this is another little video of me flipping over the urchins and then watching them flip back over. Sped up so that we don't have to wait around. And that's mostly what's happened with my research. Another project that I'm doing at the Smithsonian right now that we were just getting off the ground before COVID happened is we're doing things just like Julia is doing for you guys. We're looking at we're starting programs for students in Panama so that they can learn more about their natural environment and get more involved in science education and kind of just really be able to kind of ask questions about their environment, because where we live right now, Panama is incredible. Like there's so much wildlife that you forget about it. Like when I'm biking and I see a sloth, I'm like, oh, cool. Or when I was surfing the other day and a turtle popped up right beside me, I was like, that's nice. But these are such crazy experiences that happen all the time when you live here, because there's so many great animals and so much diversity that every day is like it's so cliche, but it's like a new adventure. So what I am looking to do, and Carolina is on board with it as well, is we're looking to do programs for schools in our area and in the Bocas del Toro province to kind of get kids more interested and more knowledgeable about what goes on in natural sciences and chemistry, and just kind of really get people excited about learning. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that's all we got to say, or that's all I have to say anyway. This is us right before COVID, the day before COVID, where we were going to schools and talking. And this is on another island called San Cristobal, and a beautiful view from the school there. Can you imagine this view from your school? It'd be pretty sweet. And yeah, so thanks so much, girls, for listening to us. It was so much fun. And
Willow says, I want to move to Panama. I hear you, Willow. I hear you. We're going to have a mass exodus to Panama. I hope that's okay. We're going to come live with you, Eileen, in your yurt. Hope you have space.
Literally, I got some sleeping bags.
Perfect. And I love what you were just saying, Eileen, about encouraging these kids to kind of care more about their environment and appreciate what they have around them, because that's something we try to do with Terranaut Club. And what you were mentioning earlier about the Bay of Fundy is the perfect example. So for any of you girls who grew up around the Bay of Fundy and who grew up seeing those tides change every day, and actually, so Kyla, I know you're from Ontario, you might not know about the Bay of Fundy, highest tides in the world. So every day, twice a day, the water level changes around 45 feet. So all of that water just leaves, and you end up being able to walk on the ocean floor, which is something that we totally take for granted. Like, how crazy is it that we can walk on the ocean floor? That's absolutely unbelievable. And there's so many tourists who come to the Bay of Fundy every year to experience that. And I think it's pretty interesting to think that when you're around something all the time, you get, and the word we use is desensitized. It's so
important to realize how cool Nova Scotia is. Like, Nova Scotia has so much diversity as well, but we take it when I lived there, I took it for granted too, because you're like, nah, whatever, a raccoon or whatever, a bear. It's not that cool, but it's just as cool as Panama. You're just, we're not used to, or we're used to it.
Yeah, so Carolina, if you came up to Nova Scotia, I'm sure that you would be pretty amazed at some of the animals.
Yes, of course. I've never ever seen a bear in my life, or a raccoon.
We're like chasing them off our lawns with brooms.
So I have one question to start it off, and then I know the rest of our girls have some questions. So I'll let you girls get your thinking caps on for questions. But my first one is, tell me about sloths. Are they really as slow as you think? Where are you seeing them? Are they protected? What's the deal?
They're actually very fast.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Like when they want to move around, like they're actually pretty fast in moving in between branches.
Like, I would say faster than like some humans.
But when they're eating and after they have just like had their lunch, they move. Like their stomachs are so full and it takes for them so long to digest that they will just like move really slow, and that's like what the people know about them, but they can move pretty fast in between branches.
I feel a little bit like we've been lied to. Does anyone else feel like they've been lied to about how fast sloths move? Yeah, yes. Madeline's shaking her head.
False
I agree.
Advertising.
False advertising. Wow, that is so cool. And are they a native species to Panama?
Yes, we have two species. We have the two-toed sloth and the three-toed sloth.
So 2 toes and 3 toes.
So the 2 toes are smaller than the 3-toed sloth, and they have like, they can look like the treated slot have like a small mask that can help you like identify them when you're like looking at them in the wildlife. It look pretty
That
cool.
is so cool. And sorry, a follow-up question. So we have a few girls who really, really love birds. Can you tell us about any super cool birds that you have in Panama?
There are so many.
So many we can talk about. Well, I personally love toucans, and we have them here around the island. You can see them while you're biking down the street, like going in between the trees.
It is special to see one though,
Yeah.
because they're not super common.
It depends. If you're going way to Drago, you can see them like.
Oh really?
Yeah, I have seen like 6 or 7 of them together, like just like hanging out in a tree.
And guys, they're so beautiful. It's like a flying rainbow. It's so incredible.
That's a great description.
We also have big birds. We have a common black hawk, like that love to hang out like on the street, going to a beach called Bluff. Like if you go like early in the morning, I like to call it the safari, because like I have my car on the island, so I would just go like really slow early in the morning looking out for birds. And this particular black hawk like love hanging out around the street, and you can just see him like along the road really close by your window, like just like looking for food or just hanging out on a branch or something. And it's really cool to see that too.
That is so cool.
Kingfishers, like when you're hanging out on the beach, you can see kingfishers like just going on a dive to take their fish and go back to the tree.
That's
One cool
awesome.
thing is that the hummingbirds that come to Nova Scotia, or that go to Nova Scotia in the summer, live here in the off seasons.
Mm-hmm.
So they come back and forth.
It's honestly, what's crazy to me is that a bird as small as a hummingbird can travel that far of a distance. That's astonishing.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
They actually do like pit stops along the way that they always like. Once they have like the pit stop that they like, they will always stop there in their journey back and forth. Like no matter how many times they do it, they will always stop in the same place.
That is so cool.
And continue their journey.
Yeah.
I don't know the real name, but cucalacas. What is the common name of them? The walking ones that make the noises? They're always at the Smithsonian.
Oh, the aramidas? Like usually like the chicken forest?
Yeah,
okay.
We should tell the girls to look those up. So they live in trees and they make the most hilarious noise, because one will start being like, oh, 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 and then they all start, and then you're just hearing the sound from a tree, but you can't really see them. And then they're almost like little dodo birds almost. They're really beautiful blue. They can't really fly. They walk around really quickly. And my friend who's a local calls them cucalacas, but the actual name is...
I don't know. I call them aramidas because that's like their scientific name.
Yeah,
That's so cool. Willow is saying in the chat that she has a parrot. Willow is one of the girls that I know absolutely loves birds. That's so cool you have a parrot, Willow. And sorry, we have a few questions. So there was one question that Madison asked in the chat. This one's for Eileen. So she wants to know, first of all, I will say that the fact that Eileen, your job was like snorkeling around collecting sea urchins sounds pretty cool. Would not turn down that job. So the question is, how many sea urchins did you kind of take daily?
What I would do is I would go out and collect. One time we collected 300 urchins in one day.
Wow.
We're picking them off the reef and then we take them back to lab. And it's kind of sad. It's so that I don't have to go out every day and snorkel. As amazing as that would be, it's not super time efficient because I have to do experiments in the lab. So I would go out maybe once a week and collect between 100 to 300 sea urchins. And then I bring them back to lab, and then I keep them in the aquarium, in an aquarium that kind of where they're comfortable, they're chilling, they're hanging out. And I would use them throughout the week in different experiments, and then I would release them back into the wild once our experiments were finished.
What were the results of your experiment?
So it was actually pretty interesting. I worked with overall 3 species of sea urchins, and they all responded differently. There was one species that was like able to withstand anything. They were super tough. Like they didn't really care. if the temperature was pretty high and they couldn't really breathe, they still stuck it out and were able to flip over. However, 2 other species were super sensitive and fared pretty poorly in high temperature and low dissolved oxygen. With the two things that were affecting the urchins the most were dissolved oxygen and temperature. They weren't actually, surprisingly, very affected by acidic conditions. Most urchins, all urchins, none of them could really survive in 35, but the 2 urchins, the really pretty red ones that I was looking at, and then another species that I didn't show a photo of, Echinometra van Brunti, which is on the other coast, which is on the Pacific side of Panama. They were super sensitive to high temperatures and low dissolved oxygen, which means that, I'll answer that one second, which means that it is not very good news for if the temperature and the dissolved oxygen levels of Panama change drastically, because it seems like they're not going to be able to withstand it. Do the urchins die while testing? Usually no, but there were a few times, especially in really hard conditions, that some of them did unfortunately not survive. Is there anything you don't like doing?
I like almost everything. I don't like too much going on in the rain, but I still do it. But about regarding everything I do, I like pretty much everything. Sometimes the rivers monitoring can be really tough, because while you're in the rivers, there's a lot like insects that can sometimes like bite you, and that will get like really annoying, especially in one river. We don't like that, so we always try to do everything super fast and efficient, so we don't like stay there longer. How many experiments or studies do you usually have going on at the time? Well, for me, in my job, we have like 6 experiments going on.
A lot.
Like, yeah, that's a lot. Like in a week, we will collect data for at least 6 different experiments, and we like continue doing that. And sometimes they will add more, and then like we will finish them, and we continue with the basic ones.
I did 1 experiment because it was all sea urchins all the time.
But it's pretty cool. It goes to show that when you're working in science, there's so many different avenues you can take. There's so much diversity, so much variety, right?
Everything.
Yeah, look at me. I started working on coral reefs in the Pacific, and now I'm working in the rivers with rain and with marine collection of salinity and temperature and all of that. Like totally different from where I started.
Yeah. And there's people at the station that look at frogs on the islands. I think that there's some that have been looking at turtles. Mm-hmm. There's been times where people have been looking at turtles, dolphins. Some people are just looking at different plants on the island. Like the possibilities are really endless. Mm-hmm.
And what's cool, especially Carolina's career shows this, is that, because someone was asking about advice becoming a marine biologist, that a lot of the skills that you're able to develop in science, so like different sampling or different scientific method skills, once you learn that, you can kind of apply it to different things. Yeah. So like, Eileen, she started out kind of doing more geology-based stuff. And then she took those skills and she was able to kind of transition over to marine biology. So, let's say you have an opportunity to do some help with bird research in Nova Scotia kind of in your summer. You're able to build some skills there that maybe then you can apply to, wanting to become a marine biologist. So I think all of this to say is that any experience in science is really valuable, and you can probably apply it to a bunch of different things.
And I feel like it's super important to note, it's like, you can do anything you want. If you think like, oh, I don't have any experience in that, you can just learn.
Yes, that's true.
Just start learning as much as you can. Even if you want to apply for something and say, I'm a fast learner, or or if you are in geology, or if you're in drama or business in school and you think, I want to actually be a marine biologist. We have the internet now. You can learn as much as you want and find out and just do it. Like, you don't need to, if you make a decision and you don't like it after, you don't need to stick to it. You can just change your mind and go do something else.
And have very cool adventures along the way.
Yeah.
Did the size or age of the urchins affect survival?
So what we found, interestingly, is small urchins usually were able to flip over easier than big urchins. I think this may have been because they required less oxygen. We are still working on that paper, so I'm not totally sure what the connection was between the size and the ability to flip over. But for the most part, it was, I don't think it was a significantly, it's just something I noticed while I was doing the testing, but I don't think it was a significant difference in terms of whether they were able to survive more or not. Because as you could see, sometimes they were so small and they could be really big as well. But overall, they kind of reacted all the same. Have I stepped on an urchin? Yes, but also I've had so many in my hands from picking up urchins and getting them off the reefs that there were, at one point, my hands were pretty much like 20% urchin spines.
And that's actually a cool part of being a biologist, is that I feel like a lot of us treat like kind of the scars that we get as like cool things to show off. I used to work with skates, which are covered in little spines, to the point that my hands would be shredded with tiny, tiny, tiny little cuts, which they all healed. But I do have a really cool scar from a really, really big sturgeon. Yeah, and it's kind of something that, I mean, not that you ever want to put yourself in a situation where you're endangering yourself, but sometimes there's little bits of the job that come home with you, whether they're sea urchin spines or other things. So that's actually kind of,
That's true.
yeah, it's kind of cool little battle scars.
Are you still working during COVID? I am not working for the station right now during COVID because my project works with schools and we can't go to schools right now. But Carolina was essential to keeping the station afloat during COVID. And they wrote an article about her in the Smithsonian.
Yes, so I'm still working. Mostly right now I'm doing telework, like on different projects. We're working on different articles that we want to publish. But I go to the station like 3 times a week to check out that everything is working properly, because there's so many equipments that can be ruined if you're not checking up on them. So many samples that scientists left behind because they left because of COVID, that are on the freezers or in the refrigerators. It depends on the samples that you have to check up that everything is working properly. If not, that will get ruined. And there's a project that where you collect rainfall every day. Like there's a rain gauge. There are 2 rain gauges on the station, and I every time I go there, I measure the amount of rain that was in that rain gauge. So I'm still working for the station, not as we used to. We're not going to the field right now, but we're still doing these pretty small works that help the station running.
Yeah, and as a biologist, if you're in the middle of working on a project, you can't just peace out and take a 2-week vacation. Yeah, you got it. Or if you do, you have to make sure that you really, really trust the people who are looking after your experiments for you. But yeah, it's awesome that we kind of, Eileen and Carolina, have 2 different perspectives and experiences on this.
Are there animals there used to humans, or some of them? Maybe the vultures, the commodores. There's not that many. Most of the animals are they kind of try and stay away from humans.
Yeah, well, I've heard that a pound turtles sometimes come out while you're waiting for the wave while surfing.
The one that came up right beside me was so close, but I could tell it didn't really want to be beside me. It saw me and then left.
And about working on coral reef and the dangers, well, there are some animals that like to live in between the coral reefs, like stonefish. That can be pretty dangerous if you encounter them, because they will stay still and will not move. So you have to be really observant and looking into the reef, and where if you like are getting too close to something, you always have to be looking out for animals that don't move. And sometimes some eels can be there also.
There are sharks here too, but we don't run into them very often.
They're not like that common into the reefs, but there are sharks also.
And you have to be really careful with the reef, because it's a very delicate structure, right? You don't want to be like walking on it and damaging it.
Because they're all alive. So you don't want to be touched. Even though it looks like a rock, it's an animal and it's living and breathing. So you have to be really careful with those.